All right, guys. So we had a lot of interesting news today, but I would say one of the most interesting stories that I saw was our good friend at the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, came out with a very controversial statement today. And, you know, the funny thing about it is some of you all might actually agree with what Ben Shapiro had to say about the situation. That's not exactly why it was controversial. It was actually controversial because he completely flipped from what he said years earlier. And Elon Musk shared it as well, by the way. Let's just go ahead and get right into it. Ben Shapiro is now calling for Donald Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin. For those who don't remember, I'll pull this article up right here. Derek Chauvin is the cop who was convicted and sentenced to prison, 21 years actually, for apparently violating the civil rights and for the murder of George Floyd. You guys might remember he held his knee on George Floyd's neck for like 8 minutes, however long it was. Turned into an entire thing during the pandemic. There were protests everywhere, all over the country, every major city. There were gigantic protests surrounding this entire situation. Eventually, he gets convicted for it. He's serving time in jail. Ben Shapiro says that Trump should pardon him. The funny thing about that is this is actually a state case. Yes, he was tried federally, but he was also tried through the state as well. So even if he gets pardoned, he would still be in prison. Nothing would really change. But what I also found interesting is that Elon Musk shared that tweet, which made it go mega viral, as you can see at the bottom. Elon's tweet has 7 million views, 6.5 million views, but Ben Shapiro's original tweet actually has 9 million views. Let's actually go ahead and listen to what exactly Ben Shapiro has to say regarding this situation.
If we are issuing pardons, however, there is one person that President Trump should pardon from federal charges forthwith. It would be incredibly controversial, but I think that it's absolutely necessary. That person is Derek Chauvin. President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. He should. He should pardon him his federal charges. If we are talking about reversing the evils of the last several years in American life, obviously COVID and its handling was a massive evil. Destroyed the economy, set us on a path to fiscal insanity, destroyed children, led to massive health-related cover-ups, just horrifying all the way around. And President Trump has taken on a lot of those things. But when it came to BLM, the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in my lifetime, was in fact the railroading of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd. The evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not in fact commit murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was high on fentanyl. He had a significant pre-existing heart condition. George Floyd was saying he could not breathe before he was even out of the car. He was in the car saying he could not breathe. Derek Chauvin, for large segments of even the tape that was shown, had his knee on George Floyd's shoulder or back, not on his neck. The autopsy of George Floyd showed that he had no damage to his trachea, that probably George Floyd died of excited delirium. There were no accusations, even at trial, that Derek Chauvin had committed a hate crime against George Floyd or that he targeted George Floyd because of his race. Nonetheless, on the basis of extraordinarily scanty evidence, and despite the fact that there was massive pressure on the jury, that the mayor of Minneapolis paid a settlement to the George Floyd family immediately, that the president of the United States suggested that Derek Chauvin was guilty right off the bat, that the jurors were being openly threatened and admitted as much. Despite all of that, Derek Chauvin was convicted on federal charges and pled guilty to federal charges. Derek Chauvin should, in fact, be pardoned on that. We will be covering that a lot more in coming weeks because I think it is worthwhile to remember that there is a man who is rotting in prison because the media decided in the middle of 2020 that they were going to turn a tragic law enforcement stop that ended with the death of a man who had a significant problem with drugs and pre-existing health problems into the raison d'etre of the entire 2020 election. And it led to vast chaos. It led to, again, the destruction of racial comedy in the United States, $2 billion in property damage, and a guy rotting in prison who the evidence demonstrates certainly was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in that case. If we're going to talk about delivering pardons, President Trump, I think, should really seriously consider pardoning on federal charges. He can't pardon on state charges. Derek Chauvin.
Okay, so that doesn't really make sense. So he even acknowledges himself that President Trump or Donald Trump can't pardon Derek Chauvin's state charges, but he could pardon his federal. I'm not sure what that would do. He's still going to sit in jail. He's not going to be released. He's just going to be a guy who is serving a 21-year prison sentence, but just happened to be pardoned by Donald Trump. That doesn't make any sense to me. But here's the reason. You would probably think that this would already be controversial enough, because the George Floyd situation, just a controversial situation all the way around. But that's actually not why he's under fire. It's not because he thinks that Derek Chauvin should be pardoned, and many people believe that George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin, right? The reason why is because in 2020, he said the complete opposite. As a matter of fact, he had a huge following even back then in 2020, and he was one of the main people who drove the narrative that George Floyd was murdered. That's the crazy thing. Let's go ahead and zoom in and read these tweets. So it says here, and remember, these were Ben Shapiro's tweets in 2020. It says government has one primary function: to prevent the violation of rights to life and liberty. A police officer destroyed George Floyd's rights. That is no excuse for our government abandoning citizens' rights to life and liberty in favor of rioters and looters. Do your damn jobs. I returned from a 2-day Jewish holiday and half the country is on fire. We all agree on George Floyd, which is why a bad cop is now under arrest. Anyone who defends looting and rioting and targeting of business owners and cops on this basis is nothing short of evil. You're not stealing that TV to honor George Floyd or protest police brutality. You're stealing that TV because you're a POS. And yes, of course, the officers in that video should be prosecuted to the full extent of their law breaking. This guy is a walking contradiction that makes no sense. This is why nobody likes the Daily Wire. So 5 years ago, you said that the officers in the video should be prosecuted to the full extent. They got prosecuted and convicted to the full extent. And now 5 years later, you're calling for that same cop that you said should be prosecuted to the full extent. Now you're calling for him to be pardoned. I wonder why he's doing that. Gee, why on earth would Ben Shapiro flip all of a sudden from the different stance he took 5 years ago? Could it possibly be for the same reason that Mark Zuckerberg flipped from the stance he took 5 years ago? Not on the same situation, but on Trump. Oh, let's pull up something. I 1000% agree with this tweet. Based in Brave says, the hypocrisy is astounding. Ben Shapiro was actively involved in the media coverage that contributed to the backlash against Derek Chauvin, playing a significant role in shaping public perception. The resulting riots led to major consequences, including civilian deaths. Yet now he shifts his stance to pardon Derek to further capitalize on the evolving narrative for financial gain. There are no true morals or beliefs involved here. Money is his God. Folks, this is a fact. Why did Ben Shapiro flip? Simple. It's because the overall narrative, remember we talked about in the previous video, I don't remember what video, but we talked about this before. I think it was the last Brett Cooper video I made. The entire country has shifted conservative. Even in blue counties and left-leaning states and cities, they all shifted to the right. Every age group, every ethnicity, except for black women. I don't think black women shifted to the right, but black men, Hispanic men, white women, young people, whatever. Everybody shifted to the right for whatever reason you want to say. He knows this. A lot of people in media know this. Stephen A. Smith knows this. That's why he's pivoting to the right. All of this is a gigantic grift. My whole thing with this is, look, we all know Ben Shapiro's conservative. I have no problem with that. We all know that. We all know a lot of these people are conservative. But shifting your stance for financial gain is trash. And that's exactly what's happening. He sees that the narrative has changed. People think differently about a lot of different things than they did five years ago. He's trying to take advantage of that to continue to grow his brand, stay relevant. Obviously it's working. A lot of people agree with him. That's the funny part. I looked under the comments on his tweet. A lot of people in the replies agreed with Ben Shapiro on that take. But the problem is people who are smart enough to go back and look at what you said before can clearly see that either you don't truly believe that or you're flipping your stance because of the new era of conservatism that we're in. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I think too. I think he still feels the same way he felt 5 years ago. That's what I think. But whatever. Anyway, just wanted to make a video on that. That's the latest drama you got. He's asking Donald Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin. Obviously not going to happen. No way. Tim Walz is the current governor of Minnesota. He would have to pretty much do the same thing for those state charges to no longer be a thing of him to get out of jail. Not going to happen. Anyway, that's today's video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.